Welcome everyone to episode 154 of Just Joshing. I am your host, Joshua Pentalaresco. I write stuff and podcast too. My guest today is the one and only incredible Megan Hart. Yeah, that's right. I got Megan Hart on the podcast. We had a really cool conversation, and I can't wait to show people what's going on. Beyond that, we are less than a week away from my live podcast, March 22nd. Owl's Nest Books. There will be cake. There will be booze. There will be me being interviewed by my sister Rachel Pentalaresco. And I'm nervous as hell because I have no idea what I'm going to be talking about. But I'm also going to be launching The Wandering God properly for the first time this year. It's going to be actually really cool to do. I'm hoping if you're listening to this, if you live in Calgary, come on out. It'll be a good time. If not, like I said, it will air eventually on the show, probably episode 160, 161. But yeah, man, I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm excited. Beyond that, man, I'm just doing my thing. These podcasts, they've been a little later than planned, primarily because Skype's a bitch. With the recordings lately, I've had to work a lot more on the audio, so that's why sometimes if there's been audio issues, that's the reason. I'm doing the best I can with them, but by and large, Skype is Skype. But that all said, I got a cool conversation coming up, so let's go right into my conversation with Megan Hart.
All right.
Which I have just done. I'm just making sure it's all up and ready and looking good. So, if there's anything incriminating you want to say, make it good. I mean, it is recorded. I mean, if it's going to be a crime, might as well be a really good crime, so.
Oh, gosh.
No?
I'll have to think of something
okay.
exciting.
My personal favorite is I Killed Mufasa. That was good. I thought that was I thought that was fun. She was my second supervillain that weekend, though, so it wasn't quite as over the top as she was hoping for. But it was good. So you having a good day so far?
Yeah. It's nice and warm here, considering that it's the end of January and we had a lot of snow in the previous few weeks. So it's just nice. The sun is shining. I have prisms in my window, so it's making a lot of rainbows. That's always fun.
Oh, you got a rainbow morning, so you're gonna be writing something happy and fantastic today, or is it like you're gonna be ironic and you're gonna be like, I'm gonna just be completely miserable?
I don't tend to write happy.
No.
So what's up on my writing schedule for today is I'm actually weirdly working on about four different projects. And I have a fifth that I need to be doing some work on too, and that's really unusual for me because I tend to work on one thing at a time.
So you are in demand. That's awesome. Congrats.
Well, I don't know about being in demand, but I have a break in my schedule, and so this is the first time in a really, really long time where I do not have. I keep telling myself I don't have any deadlines, and then I remember that I do have a deadline. And it's a project that I took on out of it because I really wanted to. So it's not a project with a contract or anything like that. But I do have a deadline to submit the story by, and I keep telling myself, oh, you don't have any deadlines. You can work on all these other things. I'm like, oh, yeah, but also this thing that you said that you would do. So that is a deadline.
Keeping your word, very, very adultish. I know, I got it. But no, I mean, you're in a nice spot. I mean, I'm gonna say you're in demand because you got, 5 different things on the go. I mean, there's a lot of authors that would kill for that, and that's really that's impressive. Maybe it's not pressing beyond your current short story at this particular moment in time, but that's also okay too, because like I said, I in looking you up, you've done a lot of books. I've
written a lot of books, yes.
Yeah, and so I'm imagining that that there's been points in your career where you have just been go, and if this minute it's not quite go, it actually might be a nice refreshing change of pace change of pace for you, because hey, I can breathe. Breathing's nice, and I can remember other things.
Some downtime is definitely nice, and I had a long number of years where I had pretty steady deadlines, and that's wonderful because that means that there's work. Someone's buying my work and it's coming out and all of that. But I reached in October, I finished what at that point was my final deadline, and I had nothing else lined up. And I had all these grand plans for over, like, let's say November, December, the last couple months of the year. I was going to do all these things, these love projects, and work on all these things, and I just really didn't work on very much at all because I was burned out, and I had a lot of stuff going on. I was in the middle of a move, and I just ended up not really working on anything. And then I get to the point where I feel like, oh no, what if I never get back to work again? What if I've lost it? What if I took this time off and now I can't ever write another book ever?
I somehow doubt that with you. I don't even like you said that, and I didn't believe a single word of that actually. and not because I understand the worry, because one of the biggest things you as a writer you always worry about is can I say something new, right? Don't get me wrong, like okay, I'm a big Ray Bradbury fan. I love Ray Bradbury. I think most people who read Ray Bradbury love him. But at the end of his career, now grant you, he had such a long career, it's not like I'm holding it against him. It's just like his stuff at the end of his career wasn't anything beyond what he had already said previously. No, it's not a knock. I mean, like I said, most of us would kill for the career he had. But he had gotten to the point where he had said everything he really wanted to say. And you could tell that in his writing. It still was, like, technically really, really good. But the spirit, like, in terms of the spirit of what you're doing, I mean, there's a real magical ingredient with anything we do. We have to have something we really believe in, something we really need to say, something that we want to communicate to the world. I think all artists need that, and to really be relevant, or to really, maybe that's not quite the right word, but it adds a dimension to your work that I think all artists need. It doesn't really matter who you are, and when you get to the point where you're repeating yourself from what you did previously, you're not adding anything really new to it. I mean, sure, once in a while it's nice to go back, but if you're getting to that point in your career where you're doing that all the time, then maybe it's time to do something else, right? Right?
I actually described this to someone recently who had said, "Oh, what are you working on now?" And I'm working on these. I have these 5 different projects. They're in different genres, and they're pretty different from each other. And I said, what the bottom line is, I really just want to keep writing things that I want to read. And I think as long as I have something that I can write that I would like to read, I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah, I think you'll be just fine. Like for me, I stopped writing in around November myself because I went to fix my teeth. So my day job in December was really busy, so I worked as much overtime as I could, and then January I went and fixed my teeth. So I'm actually getting back into the writing saddle now. I'm editing my first novel. I'm going to be releasing as an independent, and it's a silly novel. I mean, literally one of my main characters talks in wingdings. So I'm certainly having fun with it. It's just like you take that break sometimes because also, I mean, I'm afraid to ask this because I don't know you well. So because you might beat me. It's like, how old are you? The reason I'm asking that is we all hit an age too. Like I'm in my mid-30s. I can still do everything I did in my 20s. But you know what I also noticed? Right? I take a little longer to recover than I did in my 20s.
Oh yeah.
Right? I take a little longer to recover than I did in my 20s. So that means that I have to take a step back. It's like, you know what? I can't do all the crazy crap I did in my 20s. I can't. Or if I do,
I have to give myself a plan to take care of myself. You know, because gosh darn it, that's important. You got to take that time to do that. Sounds to me like what you went through in November, December, January is, yeah, you didn't do anything maybe from a writing standpoint productive, but man, you moved, you took care of other things you needed to take care of, and heck, there's nothing wrong with taking a moment to take a nap at least once in a while. I mean, right? I mean, that's a very it's
Well,
healthy.
it's about balance because, so, all right, for me, I'm fortunate enough that writing is my full-time job.
Hmm.
The problem with that is that there's never really any end point. I can set a time and say, well, I'm going to work 9 to 5, like a quote unquote real job or whatever.
Whatever.
But I'm not completely done. I can write till 5 o'clock. I'm not going to be finished. I can't one day. I might manage a short story, but even then, if I wrote the whole thing in one day, it wouldn't be polished and edited. That's not feasible. I'm not sure I know of anyone who can complete an entire project in one day. So you're never really finished. And when you work for yourself, it's very easy to just continue. Well, I'm gonna keep working because I'm not done. And taking the time to have balance is really important. You can't just be at the computer all day long writing and writing and writing and writing.
And,
Physically, it's toll.
well, there's that, but also I know this as a full time writer because you are in demand because you do have a name and you've established yourself, which by the way is awesome. But that means you answer a butt ton of emails every day, and because you're dealing with you're dealing with people like myself who are, but you're like, hey, that's cool, I don't mind being interviewed. Then you get some strange stuff. You go, what the hell am I supposed to do with you? And then you get like whatever business you're taking care of, and so I mean that's a big part of what you do too is communication back and forth between your employers, your employees, because you have your own publishing house as well, and so you're all there. There's a business end of it too, where not all of what you're doing is just writing time. Like you're doing other things as well. Even if you have assistants, you're still taking care of those things. So your day sometimes, well, depending, and deadlines are also a big thing too. If you have a big deadline, well, guess what? You're not working a 9 to 5 hour. You're working a 9 to 9 or a 9 to 11. You're trying to make sure it's done because you're a professional or something, and uh, and you want to make sure that you're doing the very best you can with the time you have. And then this all plays a factor too because yeah, I like with me, yeah, I do have a regular day job, but I always have to remember too, I only have so many hours in the day to get everything done. Unless
Yep.
my advantage over you in when is I am in obscurity, so I don't have the attention that you have, or somebody like more established like Stephen King or Dan Simmons. By the way, I'm gonna give you a compliment right here. Other than maybe Dan Simmons, I don't know anybody currently that writes in as many different genres as you. Maybe. So I hope that's a compliment. So
I'll take it as one.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah. I was like, who do you kind of compare it to? I'm like, well, Dan Simmons writes horror, sci-fi. He writes general fiction. He writes a few other things, and you do all that and some other stuff too. So you're a jack of all trades, just like he is, and that's cool because they don't exist very much actually in mainstream fiction. What tends to happen there is um, like usually what happens is you get a hit or you establish an identity in one genre, and it's really tempting for a publisher or your agents or to keep you there, right? I mean,
Absolutely. I mean, once you're well known, once you're known for writing one thing, first of all, usually that's where more work comes.
yeah,
If you're successful in one genre, then more work is going to come in that genre. And if you try to branch out, you don't. It's like starting from scratch. So I have a name in romance, but I don't have a name in horror. So in order for me to sell something in horror, I can't even really bank on, other than the fact that I can say I've completed 40 novels. So if you're taking a chance on me, chances are pretty good. You can count on me being able to finish a book.
well, you're definitely a professional, so
Yeah, that's not a guarantee of a readership. I can't say, oh, I have these kind of sales in romance. It's not going to translate into another genre. So it's kind of like starting
yeah.
from scratch each time.
It kind of
I'm reading
I, I
across.
well, 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 well. I've always thought that was a little strange. I mean, on one hand, it makes total sense, right? You've done very well in romance. You've done very well in erotica. It makes sense that they'd want to give me more work in that. But just from a personal point of sanity, if nothing else, right? I always feel sorry for Terry Brooks. I actually feel sorry for him a little bit. I grant you, he makes a good living doing what he's doing, but he's written how many Shinhara novels, right? I mean, I'm sure,
I don't know.
right? I'm just giving an example. Like he's written so many of them, right? He's almost stuck. I'm not saying that, and, I'm not saying he hates it, but I know just from a I like the ability to go into different things myself because I'm not conventional in any way, shape, or form. That's part of my problem. But the other thing too is, it's just nice to be able to try different things and use different toys. And I think it's for my personal sanity. But it also just makes sense if you can branch out in a bunch of different things. Well, you're always gonna have work, which just makes sense to me.
Yeah. And at the end, I mean, like I said, I just want to keep writing things that I want to read, and
Yeah.
I read lots more. I read a lot more than romance and erotica. So,
Yeah.
but some people, some authors who stick to one genre, they do it because that's what they love. They
Yeah.
don't really have any interest in branching out.
That's fair too.
That's their wheelhouse, and I think that there's a lot to be said for write what you love, not write to trend, not write to chase some kind of idea that you're going to become a bestseller. If only you could just write the next Gone Girl, maybe
Maybe.
that's not for you.
Well, it's interesting because some authors try to write the trend, like there's a formula and it works. Um, I again, maybe this is again, I'm certainly not coming from an area of expertise, but I've always had this as a theory. Um, if I ever write a bestseller, right? It's just an opportunity to do something else that maybe I want to do. There's no guarantee that if I get one bestseller, let's say I get one, that I'll ever get another one, right? That's like to have the sustainability, right? To have the sustainability in writing is really hard. I mean, it can be done. It has been done. But I mean, there's no guarantee that you're going to be a bestseller every single time. Also, I mean, there's going to be points where you're in really high demand. And there's just points you're not going to be in as high demand. That's just part of a cycle, right? Right? You might have that moment where like you are the center of the universe, and then the next day somebody else will come along and it's their turn to be the center of the universe, and that's cool, right? And then maybe one day someone will read a book of yours from like 5, 10 years ago, and suddenly you're back being ahead of the game. Like Stephen King and J.K. Rowling are incredibly rare. You don't get that opportunity very often. So I've always kind of looked at it like, and again, I'm certainly not coming at this from an area of expertise. Um, I would rather be well known for things I enjoy doing than being forced to make a living doing something I hate. So,
Absolutely, and it certainly makes it a whole lot easier to write the books if you enjoy what you're doing.
yeah.
I've contracts for books I ended up hating to write just because when I thought, when I pitched the idea at the time, I was like enthusiastic about it, and then it came time to actually write it, and it was this huge slog. And I always end up being proud of it when it's finished, but the actual creation of it, I'm just like, oh God, I don't want to be writing this. I want to be writing something else. But I mostly always want to be writing the thing that I don't have to be writing. That's why I'm working on like 4 or 5 projects right now because um, I had set a goal to finish a novel by the end of January, basically to start and finish, to write a novel in a month, which is not impossible.
No.
That's easily done, especially if it is my full-time thing. But in order to do that, it was a pretty high word goal every day, and I missed a couple days, which then makes it, the rest of the days need more and more and more. So I have a really high word count goal if I really want to finish this book by the end of the month. And it doesn't have a deadline. It's not sold. I don't have to finish it by the end of the month other than it's my own personal deadline.
Hmm.
And the sooner I finish it, obviously the sooner I can send it to my agents. She can try to sell it. But it's very daunting to look at that word count goal, and I get a little burned out from writing this book because, like I said, it's just something I wanted to do and I haven't completely plotted it out, so I'll write the scenes that make sense, or I feel really compelled and I'm writing out of order. Sometimes I get to the end of whatever my brain has in it for that story, but I haven't made the word count goal. But I'm not done with working for the day, so I start working on something else, and I have some smaller projects, longer time frames. So if I write a little bit on each of those, I'm still being creative. I'm still making progress on those, and then it might spark something, and I can go back to the thing that's much longer and is more pressing. But what I found is over the past 3 or 4 days, mostly I've been making whatever the word count goal. Let's say it was 5,000 words.
Okay.
I'm making 5,000 words a day. They're just not all on the thing that needs 5,000 words. I might write 3,000 words on that, which is that's a decent day's work. And then I write 500 on this other thing, 1,000 on this other thing, and then 2,000 on this thing or whatever. And eventually it all adds up. And at the end of the day, I'm like, wow, I made all of those words. They're just not all on the thing that needs all the words.
No, that's fair. So,
Here, but they're not in the place where they're supposed to be.
well, that's okay too. Sometimes, sometimes something that's been going on, I've been noticing now too, is that sometimes people as side projects are doing shorter novels. Now again, maybe for traditional publishing, that's not a terrible thing, but I always look at the fact that today our phone is the biggest medium we have. It's the medium we all talk to. We all have a smartphone. We all play games on it. We all interact with each other through our phones primarily, right? So if you look at a traditional novel, let's say a traditional novel is 80,000 words. Well, you can look at it reading it from your phone or your Kobo or your whatever your reading apparatus is, right? That because it doesn't feel like reading a book. That's just sometimes when you read books, even if they're good books, it kind of has those moments where it feels really sloggy. But if you're looking at, let's say, a 50,000 word book, right?
Yeah.
Right? That fits that model better. So maybe you have a shorter book, or maybe it's just or maybe it's just basically you're just at, maybe that's one possibility, or maybe the other possibility is just because you don't have a hard deadline, it's percolating a little bit longer, but it might be better for it,
So I'm not a big plotter in advance anyway. I usually have an idea of the beginning and the end and the middle. I like to say the vast wonderland of what if. And with this book, which is it's a sexy thriller that I've actually had the idea and been percolating for, I mean, 3 or 4 years at least, but not the actual point, just the big reveal. I always knew the big reveal, but now the plot of it, figuring out what exactly is going on. But I set a really strict deadline of a month to do the writing, and what I'm finding is that sometimes, so what I did was I actually wrote the end, which is the part that I knew the best. So the book is technically finished. I just haven't written the beginning or the middle. How we get to the point, because the only piece I really knew firmly was the big twist, the thrillery big twist in the reveal and the outcome. So there are lots of exciting pieces in the story, and I'm writing most of them, and then I'm going to have to go back and figure out the little pieces that tie them all together. And it's interesting. I'm enjoying it, and I realized that when we were talking about word length, I had been aiming for an 80,000 word book, but I used to write 100,000 word books regularly. Books were around 100,000 words for me, so 80 to me feels like so much shorter. It's like, oh, it's so much less, and what if I aim for 75? That's even less.
Well, yeah, but I get you. But there. It's not like I'm going to tell you anything about writing you don't already know. But I mean, it's just like you said, there is something to be said about a book being its own boss. I have plans sometimes with my books, and they laugh at me. Like, I can actually hear my book laugh at me. It's like, is that what you think we're going? It's like, maybe. And then I get scared and frightened, and then they tell me, we're going this way. This is the way it's going to be. And it sounds like this book's the boss, and you're like, I wanted to get more done, and it's like, nope, deal with it.
For all the words that you have for today. And the thing is that when I'm not trying to force the writing, because in times past I would have just stared at my computer and felt really kind of down about the fact that I didn't get as much done. But now I write everything that I have in my head, and I write as many words are in there on that story. And if I get to a sticking point where I'm like, oh, I'm not really sure exactly where I'm going, I've been switching to these other projects, which are a little shorter. One's a romance, so that's pretty standard, and I absolutely know exactly where that has to go and find the moments in that. So, and I write a little bit on that, and then I write a little bit on this other thing, and I'm ending up being much more productive. Even if I may not finish this book by the end of the month, I will have made progress. I will have made additional progress in 3 other things that I wouldn't have even been touching if I had been so focused on this one thing, this deadline. I can only be writing this. I can only do this.
I
had a deadline contract and I didn't have a choice, that would be different.
Absolutely.
Only a month. I would never ever take a contract where I only had a month to write a book from start to finish, including editing. I would. Maybe for $1 million.
Well, no, for $1 million, you'd do it. You'd hate every minute of it, but you'd be like, just think of the money. You can do this, and
That would definitely motivate.
Oh yeah, you'd be motivated.
On that, or take a contract thing that would be so stressful and hard to do. So.
Well, that's it. I mean, you probably be doing lots of 4 and 5 letter words, and everybody around you wouldn't want to be near you, and they'd understand. But they'd also be like, wow, never do this again. And you're like, think of the money, think of the money. It'd be almost like your Ruby Red Slippers with Dorothy. Like, instead there's no place like home, it's like, think of the money, right? But
I'm not sure it would be worth $1 million.
No, probably not. But you might, there's, so a friend of mine wisely pointed out to me, there's like what we call a resentment meter when we do a job, right? So, if I do this job this way, how much would it take for me not to resent doing it? $1 million.
Right.
Right? Perfect. Right? $1 million. I'm still resenting it. $2 million. I'm not resenting it, but I hate myself. Okay. Yeah, right. That's what's in your head when you agree to a project like that. It's like, I can live with hating myself while I resent doing this job. And that's like I said, we all. I mean, look, I'm not gonna say never do anything, because as you just point out, with the right motivation, sure, I try. I give it the old college try at the very least, right? But I mean, you have to. But that takes, like I said, if it's not something you're comfortable doing, or naturally you're capable, like it's not your pace, it's not your wheelhouse, as you put that earlier.
Yeah.
Right. If you take 4 months to do it,
go ahead.
Well, if you take 4 months to do a book normally, right? That's your wheelhouse. You can speed that up. You can a little bit, because again, you're just going at a pace you're comfortable with. Doesn't mean you can't increase your speed if you need to on some points, but that's your comfort zone. Well, then, to do it in 3 months, okay, I can do it. I'm going to be a little uncomfortable at the end about some things, but I can do it. 2 months, are you sure? 1 month, you just openly laugh at whoever made that a job to. No. Find somebody else, I can't do it. And that's it, right? But going back to the fact that you're working on 4 or 5 different things right now, like, this is, like, again, because I'm not, like, this is normally what I do, right? I'll have, like, a big project in my head, like I'm working on right now, and then I'll have, like, a couple smaller things I'm working on right now. And when I get stuck on one thing, right? Well, maybe I'll be doing like what I'm doing now. I'm interviewing Megan Hart for my podcast, which is just cool, awesome, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Yeah, you're totally awesome. So that's awesome. So I'm doing that. So now I'm gonna come out of this maybe with an idea for this novel I have. That's kind of in like this freaky noir thing I'm working on. It's like, hey, I can work on that for a little bit. I got a deadline with editing this novel. So that's got to be my priority. But I find that it's just it's good to be working on different things. Your mind's always being challenged and pushed, and it's like playing with. It's almost like it's almost like you're stimulating different parts of your brain doing different projects, and so you're never really you get tired, but you're never blocked. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I kind of keeping my interest. Like I'm really excited to get back to this story. So I've written, this part of this story, and instead of feeling the next day like, oh God, now I have to do this, I'm more excited about it. The wheels are turning in my mind, and when I'm giving myself a little bit of a break, but still pushing forward on another project, I'm still thinking about the thriller, and this would have to happen. I make a note of myself. I mean, make a note to myself. This is what's going to happen. And like I said, I have for the longest time just worked on one thing at a time. Unless let's say I'm writing a book and then I have to set that aside in order to do revisions or something on something that I finished before and has now gone through the editing process and has come back to me for whatever reason. So sometimes I will be working on more than one thing at a time, but one's writing and one is more the publishing side of it. But I can't remember the last time, if I ever worked on this many projects simultaneously each day, doing at least a little bit on each one. I always thought I would be way less productive if I did that, but like I said, what I'm actually finding is I'm doing more. I'm doing more work.
Which it's actually kind of cool when you discover those things about yourself. It's like, hey, I can do this, and this, and actually maybe do it better.
Maybe this will be what I do moving forward. Maybe instead of spending so much time sort of just staring, and then at the end of the day feeling like, oh man, I wasn't as productive as I wanted to be today. I will have more than one thing going at a time, and be more productive that way. I mean, I always used to write in order as well. I didn't write out of order, and then when I started to have more deadlines, and so I didn't have the luxury of, well, I don't know what's coming next, so I'm going to put this aside. I needed to make word count in order to finish a book by a deadline, so I started just writing the scenes that I did know what I wanted to write, rather than knowing, hey, I want to write this big fight scene, but it doesn't come until later in the book, so I'm not going to write it until later. If it was in my head and I needed to make word count, and that's what I felt most compelled to write that day, I would write out of order. So now I write out of order almost all the time to keep myself moving forward, because I can always revise and smooth and fill in the gaps, and I can always fix what I have written. But if I didn't write anything, I can't fix it.
No, it's just
fix the wrong words, but I can't fix words I didn't write. So when I discovered that writing out of order really pushed my productivity and kept me more interested in what I was doing, now I almost always do that. So I'm kind of excited. Maybe 2018 is the year that I learned that I can write, 4 or 5 things at a time.
That's cool. That's awesome that you're still discovering like different things. So I'm gonna ask something, because again, I know you from your horror. I never actually knew you from your romance, which makes me maybe in the minority. And the reason I know that is because I know Craig DeLuey and Chris Mars, and yeah, they've been on my show too. And I got so the first thing I read from you was from Intersections. So my question to you is, why horror? Like what grabbed you into horror? Because you've made a career doing romance, erotica, general fiction. This feels like, is it just because it's a new challenge, or you've always loved horror and this is your opportunity? Where was the decision to do this?
I have actually always loved horror. I mean, even as a young kid, I was way into scary things and scary movies and scary books, always. And so when I started writing, I started writing in elementary school, but when I realized that you could write as your job, like that was a thing that people did, and I decided that that's what I wanted to do, and I started to write stories with the aim of getting them published. Once I understood that that's how it worked, I wrote horror, science fiction, and some fantasy. That's what I started writing. But it was harder. It was harder to sell those things. Romance is, for a very long time, has been the most popular genre in terms of sales. So when I started writing novels, and I liked reading romance novels, and I liked a lot about them, that too, and I liked sexier stories to read. So when I started writing, obviously not in elementary school, but when I was a little older, I figured that I wanted to write something that was sexy and romantic, and it just turned out that that's what was easier to sell. There was more of a market for it. So once I started doing that, it just continued on from there. I mean, as far as getting work, I was very happy to continue writing the kinds of stories that someone was going to pay me to write.
Oh, totally.
That was very,
Good.
very gratifying, and certainly gave me a lot of inspiration and motivation to continue. But I always wrote horror and science fiction, and even if it was maybe erotic horror or science fiction romance, something that could still be sold. And then as time went by and I got older and had more established in my career, the wonderful thing was when I was making enough money and having the contracts and the level of work in romance and erotic fiction that allowed me to do the things that I wanted to do, which was write some horror. And so I just have always, I set myself a goal a few years ago that I wanted to be actually published in horror, which is different than writing it. I could write it all day long, but I made a goal that I actually wanted to write a full-length horror novel, which I had never done. I'd only written short things. And then I loved it so much, and I just decided that it's something that I love, and I really want to, so I'm going to start pursuing it, which meant getting more contacts in the horror genre, making contacts with other horror writers and going to more horror-themed conventions, and not taking time away from the romance, which I still like doing too, but just something for me, something that was my own desire in writing the projects that made writing the things that I wanted to write. So that's how writing horror came about, and I'm still working on it. I would love to become known as a horror writer, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
Well, maybe where you'll end up is just being Megan Hart best-selling author. Period. No genres.
Yeah. Of everything. That's all author. Everything.
What? I mean, so one of my all-time favorite authors, Isaac Asimov. He literally did write everything. So I mean, it's not impossible, right? So maybe we'll be having this conversation in 10 years, and you have not only written horror, but you've done fantasy, science fiction. You've written essays, commentaries, and you've done anything that would interest you. You've written about, and then you'd just be Megan Hart, queen of all things story.
Well, I'm just happy, and like I said, I just want to keep writing things that I want to read, and so if I can be branching out and writing a whole bunch of things that I want to read, and some other people want to read them too, if more people want to read one thing and fewer people want to read a different thing, as somebody else is excited to read it and enjoys it, then that's going to be good for me.
Yeah. I think that's all anyone can hope.
There's no horror, unlike in the 80s, horror does not have that pinnacle anymore, and a lot of horror isn't even being sold or promoted as horror. It's psychological suspense or dark thrillers or supernatural thrillers, or it's under a different name. So
yeah, no, I noticed that when I went to so I just came back from fixing my teeth. I was in Yuma and I was looking for a horror section, and there was none in the Barnes and Noble there at all. I was like, what the heck is this? Right, up in Canada we still have a horror sections, right? But here, down in the States, it doesn't exist. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, and like even Stephen King, who, if you ask, I think anybody, you would say Stephen King writes horror, but his books are shelved in fiction. They're just shelved under fiction. There is no section. Very few places have a section just for horror, and I think in some ways that's in a way that's good, because somebody who says I would never read horror still might pick something up if it's listed as a psychological thriller or something instead. And even though you or I might consider it horror, but there's so many different subgenres as well that people think of it as the most extreme things. Oh, it's got to have a monster in it. Oh, it's got to be really super gory. And the wonderful thing is that no, I mean, I think there are lots of things that are horrifying and scary and I would consider horror, but kind of sneak in under something else.
Well, the best.
Then people will read it anyway.
Well, the best kind of horror is when the monster is not something you imagine, not something you actually see on the page or see on the screen. I'm a big Hitchcock guy. I love Alfred Hitchcock. He was the master of creating a monster and never actually letting you see it, right? Because when you imagined it,
It's so much scarier.
yo, absolutely. No, horror is about like horror at its best is about really. I'm a Magic the Gathering player once upon a time, and the head designer actually said, well, horror, when you sit there and think about it, is really about doing one thing. It's in one moment. It doesn't matter what's in there. It can be monsters, no monsters. It can be a thriller, psychological. There's a moment where you can actually see that it's this very scary reality being possibly real, which is why zombie apocalypses were big for a while, because that was almost believable. Now it's become a joke now because everybody's done a zombie apocalypse, but when it came out, the initial idea of one, there was a part of you that could buy into it, because there is a certain um, believability to it. I mean, just you have to go out on Black Friday for Christmas, and you can see all kinds of things that make you think that maybe we will turn into zombies someday. And right, and I mean, there is an aspect that good horror, when you get right down to it, has that moment where in that book where it's like, holy shit, this could happen. Book that scared me, going back to Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451. That actually scared me. I didn't get scared.
People would consider that horror. Like
But
dystopian, but
yeah, but the thing is, I actually do consider it a little bit of horror, because the idea that people would lose empathy, the idea that people would watch these giant big screens TVs, holy shit, he was a prophet, right? But I mean, the point I'm getting at is there was a moment, like, I could see it, like I could truly see that reality where people don't read, people become ignorant, people become insensitive, people lose their ability to empathize with each other or deal with anything that's real. So when they read something and that made them cry or angry, or they didn't have the coping mechanisms to deal with it anymore, right? There was something in there that I bought. And that's why it terrified me, right? I could see that moment. That's what horror tries to do. If horror can do that, it doesn't really. Everything else doesn't really matter, right? You can have zombies, bat things. You can have the Fly. You can have Frankenstein. It really doesn't matter, right? The great horror comes down to the fact is, can I believe in this moment, in this story, that this could actually happen? Going back to Craig DeLuise, Supper of the Children. That's an excellent book.
yeah, wrecked me because I have children and just the length. You know, you always think when you have kids, I would do anything for my children. I would do anything with my kids. But okay, so really though, what would you do?
Yeah, see, that's why that was so good, because it tackled, like, it goes back to what I said. There was a moment you bought it because you had kids. If you have kids, you understand that. It's like, wait, would I do that? Could this be real? It got you, right? That's why it's so good.
Making that sacrifice and doing those things, and
yeah, that's why that book is still really good, because it's really horrifying, right? Because you can see that being real. Another book of his he wrote with Jonathan Moon, Children of God. That thing wrecked me, because that was based on a real thing, and they captured, like, some of those moments incredibly well. But that's what horror does. Like, that's what horror, when you sit there and think about it, horror does that better than any other genre.
I think it's very difficult to be scared, other than like a jump scare, which would be hard to do in a book. I mean, scare in a book, I don't know, even if you can do that. But in order for me to be scared, I have to actually care about the people in the story. And when I was a young person, I read Pet Sematary, and it scared the crap out of me because, you know, people coming back to life and all of that. But when I read it after having that book terrified me because it's not really at its heart a story about resurrecting pets and people. It's about losing a child.
Yeah.
And that, to me, well, after having kids, hit so much harder and so much deeper. And the scariest scenes that I could have told you about when I read it as a teenager, I don't even remember what I thought, but I can tell you how the horrifying. I mean, I remember exactly the scene, and he describes, there's a single shoe, and oh my god, and the funeral, and like I just read the story from a completely different standpoint, and it was even scarier. And I think that's one of the few that I have not reread, and probably be able to reread because it just was so horrible and awful and terrifying. And I'm a huge Stephen King fan and have read everything and probably will read everything that he's written, but stories, even his best works, are the ones that I think are the ones that aren't really about, like The Shining's not really about a haunted hotel. It's really about the dissolving of a family because of addiction.
Yep.
That's the scary, that's that, whether we are realizing it or not, that's the part that we're relating to.
Yeah, exactly.
Why it's so horrible and scary. And he's written some other books that were scary and frightening and all that, but there wasn't a kernel in it that really called to me in the same way.
Well, no. Well, and there's some, like, for him, it's his Dark Tower series. Like, I love that series. I love that series. I openly wept at the end of the last book. I wept. It made me cry. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. I don't know if he's ever going to do anything to top that.
I don't know. I also wouldn't say it's horror.
No, it's not. It's a
science fiction-ish, fantasy-ish, scary, horror-ish. It's incomparable.
Well, for me, see, if you want to break this all down, it's about a man who sold his soul to get something, and in the process of trying to get it, he discovered his soul again, and then he lost it. That's the story, and it breaks you because you see who this man becomes, and you're like, he was this badass when he started, like, ooh, you're a badass as in Clint Eastwood kind of badass, but then he got layers. He became something else, and then to lose it all at the end. It's like,
go through it all again.
Yeah, you're like, my God, like that wrecked me. It really did, right? So that.
Did you see the movie?
No, I have not seen the movie.
It's very good.
It's very good.
And it is not the story. It is not the Dark Tower story that we know from the books. It's basically a reboot. Like, okay, so he's rebooted. He's started over because there's more than one universe.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the story was completely. I don't want to say it was completely unfamiliar. It drew a lot pieces from the books and characters from the books, but the story itself, the plot of the movie, was not that from the books. And I was really skeptical because I'm a huge fan of the books, but I really, really liked it. I thought it was.
All right, I'll check. I'll check it out. With my schedule, I'm not usually cool enough to go see movies very often. I'm so behind with pop culture. It's not even funny. I'm still watching Fringe. All right, I'm getting there through it slowly but surely. Right. Going back to what we talked about earlier. It's just, for me, I'm always going, and so I don't always have the time to go, okay, let's get out of my bubble for just a second and watch something. And the other thing too, sometimes I don't want to watch Fringe. Sometimes I want to watch Fairy Tail, which is anime, just because it's mindless. I need something a little less meaty, because I don't need meat right now. I just wrote about this. I need something light and fun. So every once in a while I get to go to a movie once in a blue moon. So I'm so behind. I'm never going to be hip or cool ever again. Just that I'm done.
wouldn't worry about being hip cool.
Yeah.
When you're starting to worry about hip or cool, pretty much that you're not ever going to be. So.
Oh yeah. Pretty much. I actually in my bio for my novel I said I'm not cool enough for Netflix, or Air Miles or anything like that. So just because this is just who I am. I don't take myself very 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 seriously. I find that I think the so a lesson I got reminded in the last week is no matter how far you come, you still have a long way to go, and no matter what you achieve, it's great to enjoy that moment, but you have to keep going, because we only live once, and we can't rest on our laurels because everything changes all the time.
Absolutely. Far. That's what I say.
Yeah. Well, Miss Megan, if I can call you Miss Megan, I think we have a pretty good interview here. So, I guess I should ask this: what's come out recently, or what is coming out, and how can people find you?
So, first of all, anyone who's interested can find me at meganhart.com, meganhart.com. That's my website. I am on Facebook and on Twitter. Facebook, Read in Bed, and Twitter, Read in Bed as well. Actually, no. My Twitter is Megan_Hart. Forgot that for a minute. So I'm all over the normal social media, Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all of that. And as far as what's coming out, I have the first book of a trilogy. Came out in January. The second will be out in February. The third will be out in March. So they're doing a rapid release program, which I think is awesome because each of them, the first two have cliffhanger endings, which is the first time I've ever done that. They're either really well loved or loathed. So I'm getting some mixed feedback on whether people love the cliffhanger endings or not. But it's a trilogy, and they're all coming out in rapid succession, so nobody should have to wait too long. And those are what is considered near future set sexy romance.
All right.
It's called Dangerous Promise. The second one is called Wicked Stranger, and Wicked Attraction, and the third one is called Forbidden Stranger. So they are romance novels, sexy romance novels with a lot of action and a near future setting, which to me means science fiction, but it's not spaceships and aliens science fiction. It's more, I want to say it's a little bit, if people are enjoying Black Mirror, the stories aren't really anything like Black Mirror, other than stories are based on a certain technology that we do not have right now, but seems, at least to me, as I wrote it, feasible based on technology that we do have now. So it's a lot of fun to write, and I'm really excited to see the 3 of those books coming out. And then that's it for this year up until this point. Like I said, I'm working on 4 or 5 different things, so hopefully in the next few months I will have release dates for at least some of those.
That was a wicked conversation with Megan Hart. Like I said, her current trilogy, which she mentions at the end, is available now. You should definitely check it out. I want to thank Megan very much for coming onto the show. You're welcome back anytime. And that will do it for this episode of Just Joshing. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so a number of ways. You can subscribe to the podcast either through iTunes or through Podomatic. That'd be cool. I have a YouTube channel, Joshua Pentalaresco. Past episodes are there. Feel free to listen. I have my books, The Watcher, Storm Dancer, and The Wandering God. You can pick them up through MirrorWorldPublishing.com, Amazon, any place books are sold. You can definitely take a look at it there. Come to my live podcast, March 22nd, Owl's Nest Books. That'd be cool. But beyond all that, whatever you're doing, I hope you're inspired, you're doing well, you're kicking ass. Keep dreaming out there with your eyes wide open because, hey, the world is what you make it. All right? All right.
Josh.